At the point when siblings take off for a day of investigating and cavern plunging, the last thing they'd believe is that one of them will not be returning. It's difficult to accept that a flying course standard salvage jumper would succumb to a solitary terrible choice, yet that is the awfulness of cavern plunging botches. You don't get another opportunity. This is the deadly breakdown of the Goss Gorge plunging misfortune. Michael and Paul Hayden had investigated a neglected water well cavern in Goss Gully. During their experience, growing up, they had been down in this cavern, commonly involving it as a family watering opening with their kin during California summers. As a family with 6 children, they generally investigated the dry bits, while climbing and swam in the profound overflowed well segment. In the inside from the external, it didn't seem as though much. The entry was a little dim, opening estimating around 3 FT by 4T, close to the town of La Center, California. The way was a flat entry for around 50 FT, then a move down a slanting slope for around 30 FT. The way progressed forward until the overwhelmed pool region was arrived at. This was just 150 FT from the entry, so it's a speedy outing to investigate and play in the water for energetic undertakings. The region included dry cavern edges and openings, as well as 100T profound water pools between well shafts above. As the young men progressed in years, they acquired a few abilities and became bolder in their arrangements to investigate this unwanted water well. They had been to passages and caves inside the overflowed segment throughout the long term, yet presently they needed to look somewhat more profound. Luckily for the siblings, Paul had turned into a top scuba jumper as an Air Force standard salvage educator for almost 15 years. He had been a piece of the first-class standard salvage power. His colleagues portrayed him as honest, arranged, protected, and gifted. As an expert sergeant in the air power, he had committed almost 20 years in support of others. He was an very gifted open water jumper and had a lot of involvement to act as pioneer for their new experience. Their mom expressed that they had done this kind of plunging there many times throughout the long term, so they had a lot of involvement with this cavern and these explicit circumstances. On September 17, 2000, Paul wanted to investigate a few farther passages and well shafts in the cavern. They climbed up to the cavern, conveying the scuba gear to the pool region. He was utilizing his mounted GoPro camera as a light source and was outfitted with 2 long stretches of air. Michael wanted to remain in the fundamental cavern to screen his sibling, realizing as far as possible they were working with the siblings, had a framework to speak with the rope tie that was joined to a stone in the principal cave. Michael would give several pulls on the rope to mind Paul's status. Paul would then pull 2 or multiple times. In light of show that he was all right, things appeared to be going great. The lead was being pulled down true to form, and Michael kept on taking care of the rope length out for his sibling. He had pulled a couple of times, and Paul had answered after around 20 minutes. He pulled 2 times and sat tight for an answer. This time there was nothing. He pulled again, except for viewed the line as close. His moment suspected was that Paul was stuck. He pulled as hard as he could. However, there was no delivery on the line. After only a couple of moments, he passed on the cavern to get jumper support. He realized that his sibling had just an hour and a half of air remaining, so assuming he was caught moving immediately was fundamental. Michael burst through the entryways of the Center Valley Sheriff's specialty to look for crisis help. The division answered promptly. The LA Province Sheriff's specialization, alongside the Mantro Search and Salvage Group, answered the scene. They utilized off-road vehicles to venture to every part of the Rough Valley. To the cavern entrance, the LA region local group of firefighters joined them for a full salvage group. Once at the cavern, they entered the water promptly to endeavor a salvage. When the siblings had first shown up, Paul was amped up for investigating past his typical caverns and passages. This cavern framework was really a leftover of an old water well framework from 1915. This cavern included caves from regular disintegration and water development, as well as shafts from the surface For water access, the very much had been deserted quite a while in the past, so these caverns and shafts were overwhelmed with water, and the air had for quite some time been stale. There were sump pools that were 100 ft profound. Between these pools were burrows loaded up with water, which prompted other cavern regions. The first well shafts were worked out at the water level and made a little 3-tex 3T region where the water could be gotten to by pipes from the surface. Those lines had for some time been eliminated. Soil and rock filled the thin line regions over the natural matter, delivered rock gases into the chamber beneath, and water disintegration of the stone contributed gases too in the wake of swimming through caverns and passages in the front region. He at last came to one of the shafts. It was just 3 ft wide inside this shaft, which made it a piece lumbering for Paul's body, with a SCUB tank on his back. As he gazed upward with his camera light, he could see the brilliant impression of the surface above it was an air pocket in the highest point of the shaft. Paul was an exceptionally experienced scuba jumper, yet he was not a prepared or guaranteed in cave plunging. He had sufficient experience to realize that air pockets in caverns can be extremely perilous. His family expressed that he ordinarily conveyed a lighter to test the oxygen content of air in a pocket prior to eliminating his controller on this day. He didn't. His camera records the second he came up into the pocket of gas, with the view up the highest point of the shaft, enlightened by his camera light. He then, at that point, eliminated his controller from his mouth and calmly inhales. The recording shows the mass of the shaft and afterwards submersion in water. He makes no endeavor to return the controller to his mouth, which recommends he is totally crippled. Paul sinks promptly to the lower part of the shaft and shows no further development. It was a couple of seconds from controller evacuation to submersion. So what befell Paul? It appears hard to accept that a solitary breath of air could bring about his demise, yet the video proof demonstrates it. I'm certain, on the off chance that you're plunging with a full tank of air, you feel happy with really looking at the pocket. In the event that it smells unpleasant or feels choking out, you just set your controller back in your mouth and continue on. However, tragically, it isn't so much that basic, simply a solitary breath of air that is above 10% carbon dioxide will result in prompt loss of cognizance. This is because of carbon dioxide harming. Ordinarily, carbon dioxide makes up around 0.4% of the air we inhale. When the air in our lungs is close to the venous blood that is loaded with carbon dioxide, it rapidly leaves the blood and enters the air, where there is a much lower focus. When carbon dioxide in lung air is in excess of multiple times higher than that in the blood, then CO2 will quickly drive into the circulation system. In under 1 second, gases move toward most elevated fixation to bring down fixation. Ordinarily, this cycle just heads down one path, eliminating carbon dioxide from the body. For this situation, the high grouping of CO2 in the air reverse the bearing of dispersion. Very elevated degrees of carbon dioxide in the blood brings about intense respiratory acidosis, where the blood turns out to be profoundly acidic and destructive. Assuming such a gas openness occurred in a modern area, collaborators might have the option to haul you out of the hazardous condition. Oxygen can be regulated and crisis clinical consideration can begin immediately. At the point when you are in a passage of water, blacking out is lethal. The full tank of air sinking with him was futile. He basically slipped into the water and kicked the bucket inside one little while. There was nothing that anybody could do. By then, his sibling would have been pulling his line with no reaction after Paul was at that point gone. This kind of death is an unmistakable update that thoroughly prepared, genuinely able individuals can be lost in a moment. One choice finished the existence of a so achieved man and had been the hero when others were in inconvenience. He was an accomplished scuba jumper and had some information on cave plunging. The issue is that cavern plunging is its own extraordinary classification, or with very one-of-a-kind issues and dangers. fitting preparation long stretches of directed insight and certificated totally. Important to comprehend the range of lethal dangers cave jumpers can experience.